Hello and welcome to another episode of the Footy Form Guide podcast. I'm of course your host Wally, joined as always by my good mate Harro. Harro, we are in very different conditions this week because we're in an actual studio. Well, I am. You're still in your same studio down the coast, but we are now going out on YouTube. So if you're watching this, obviously you'll know that. No surprises there, but for those listening, it is a little bit different for us, mate. How are you feeling?
Yeah, good, mate. We've actually moved into the 21st century. I think all of the feedback I've had about this podcast is, the content's great, but geez, you guys do a terrible job producing it. And I was like, it's just me and Wally. So we've got a bit of help, mate, and we've stepped up a level. So, good. I think it's going to be fun.
Very, very good, mate. Look, we've got a lot to cover this week. Interestingly, I've gone through all the games. There's actually a lot of sort of win-loss trends and some stuff to do with the grounds, which we'll go through. There's a lot we're gonna cover, so we should get stuck in. Firstly, of course, as we always do, we are accountable. Highlights, lowlights of the round. What did we get right, mate?
Yeah, mate. So from a betting point of view, our highlights, I did a bit of, as I do every week, go back through last week's podcast and do a bit of an audit. And, mate, it was very positive on the whole. So, we started off with the Gold Coast -4.5. And if you got on early, you had a win there. If you waited till the bounce and backed that, then perhaps you might have missed out. So hopefully people were listening and getting on after they heard the show. So that was a good start. Of course, the best bet, Wally, which we're back ahead of the ledger there now. That was the Doggies over Essendon and absolutely crushed that, mate. So, yeah. And as I said last week, mate, if you're laddering all the best bets, all of the winners so far have laddered up. So you're having a great time. When we win, we're smashing it. When the best bet loses, we're losing by a kick, basically. So that's going fantastically well. A few other things that we sort of found across the course of the weekend, mate. We had a nice $4.50 same game multi winner in the Blues versus Swans. We had Walsh under his possession line with another week where we've picked out Jordan's opponent. Every week he's going to get someone and keep them under their line. We're finding that person most weeks, so that was pleasing. The trend that just wants to continue to the end, mate. Blues games going under the total points. And again, we had the Swans also under 85.5. And the other bloke who's just making us cash week after week is Connor Rosie, mate. And he hit 30 again, paying $2.30. So plenty to like last week, Wally. Hopefully we can keep it going, mate. So we also had under 187.5 in the Hawks Gold Coast game. Now, obviously the bet lost. They did kick 31 goals, 14. So I feel like we're a little bit stiff there, mate. They were kicking them from everywhere. Expected scoring was in the 150s. And also in that game, we had Took Miller as the only leg we needed to get home for a multi. All the other legs won. He ended up with 22. We needed him to get 24, and he spent the last quarter cramping up. So I felt like we're also a bit stiff there. But if there was one disappointing team across the weekend, a team that we did like, it was probably the Giants, mate, who I think they don't have many fans, but whatever fans they do have would probably be pretty disappointed with them. And they let the punters down too, mate.
Yeah, they sure did, Harro. I just don't. We'll talk to that. Obviously, we'll talk to their game in more detail. I just don't know where they're at week in, week out now. And there's a few teams in that boat, but them especially. I just don't know. I've lost a lot of confidence in them, and let's be honest, I've been pretty big on them the last couple of years. Mate, let's get stuck into some questions off social. We're going to start with Glenn. I'm going to throw this straight to you because I can't answer this. And basically, it's our man Glenn he's on this a lot. He's very active within our community. Is the obvious diving for free kicks by a number of the Hawks players impacting their ability to actually win contests? Well, no, because they're winning the free kicks and they're kicking goals from them. Does this need to be addressed by coaching staff? I will say it's not just all the Hawks players. There's two that they say do it. One of them happens to be 4'10" or something, so it's pretty hard to not tackle him high. I think there's ducking and diving are two different things. That's all I'm going to say, Harro. Ducking, yes. Diving, I don't know. I think that there was Kane Corns called a few out this week. Vandermeer was one. There is a bit of diving going on. I don't know. Does it need to be addressed by the coaching staff, Harro? I don't know.
Well,
I mean, it's
I'll
not
tell you
really,
one thing,
this is
Wally.
not our place. Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that would concern me if I was a Hawks fan.
Oh,
They won't be getting paid in the finals, mate.
They
The
won't
umpires
be.
put the whistles away in the finals. So these free kicks that you might be getting now, they're not going to come in September.
Yeah,
So adjust now.
Yeah, but we're not getting 10 a game in front of goal. We're not kicking 6 to 8 goals a game with these. There's a couple here or there. I don't think any of them have decided a game of footy yet. So I might be wrong, but I look back at it and I think we'll be all right. Overall in the game, do you think it's happening a little bit more, though? The diving, the ducking, are we seeing a little bit more of it? Because it has been called out a bit in the media.
Well, yeah, I think the umpiring in the whole is a big issue week to week, and it probably isn't getting talked about as much. I mean, they like to focus on other things, and especially the coaches aren't really allowed to talk about it either. But what stood out to me on the weekend with the umpiring, I mean, it doesn't really affect the betting so much, so it's not really our area. But I think with the inconsistencies in the deliberate out of bounds, if they're going to do it the way they are, just make it last touch. Fair dinkum, because you're just absolutely guessing every time the ball goes out of bounds. It's almost like,
How deliberate or insufficient intent can happen when there's a smother on the footy. That one was extraordinary. Anyway, all right, mate, we'll move on from that because, let's be honest, we don't really care, to be honest, about that area.
We don't care.
We're here for the punt. No. Our man Bobby, 10 rounds in, thoughts on Brownlow, Rising Star, Coleman and flag bets. I've got some thoughts here, Harro. You probably do too. Should I go first or do you want to?
You go, mate. I'll get the markets while you're going.
Yeah, beautiful. So Brownlow for me, Dacos is starting to get to a backable price. I know he wasn't a full training this early in the week. I don't know what's going on. I mean, they've got North. Do they give him a rest? Do I wait until next week if someone else plays a good game? He's $5 now. The other one I was going to ask you is, can Bont win at $26 if he plays like he is every game for the rest of the season?
Mate, I hadn't looked at these questions before we started, Wally, so I just quickly scoured the markets. And actually, the first guy, I had to scroll a long way down, and it was Maxi Gawn at $51. I feel like he's having maybe it's a little bit of recency bias because he's had such a big last month, but I don't think it's going to be a really high polling Brownlow like what we saw last year, especially with how much the tag is playing a role at the moment. And we're seeing like Dacos the last 3-4 weeks, he really hasn't had any impact. So, you might want to look outside of the guys getting, regular tags. And a little bit like when Ollie Wines won it, mate. He was just the guy who didn't get tagged all year. Not necessarily the best player, but I don't have a strong opinion, but I do like the look of Gawn at $51. I know it's been a long time since a Ruckman's won it, but it could play out a little bit differently this year. But I do, mate, I just don't see how the Bont finishes his career without a Brownlow. He's just too good.
He deserves one. He deserves one. Well, $26 if you think he can keep going with this run, even though he missed a bit of footy to start the season. Coleman, for me, I still like Hogan at $4. Tracy at Freo is at $15 and he's about to enter. He's only 6 behind. He's about to enter a nice little patch where he could find a lot of goals. So I don't mind that either. Do you have any opinion in the Coleman?
Don't have a strong opinion, but when you look at the prices and sort of think about how good each player is, I don't know how far Thilthorpe is behind, but he could have. He could kick 10 this weekend against West Coast, and then all of a sudden he's right back in it. So the only thing against him is he does do a bit of backup ruck, which takes him away from the goals for about a quarter of the game. So, that's the only thing against him. Otherwise, I think this is a pretty open market, mate. And it could really go anywhere at the moment.
And the other one's the Rising Star. For me, Ashcroft too short at the $2. Given how predictable the Rising Star can be, and we see such a change in it every year, and you don't really know until late. How many times have we seen a favourite, even under $2, early to midway point of the season, just get rolled late, whether it's through injury or other things? The 3 for me I looked at, if you like any of these, Langford's $7, O'Sullivan's $9, and Lawler's $10. Any of those could easily win it with a couple of good weeks. So if you like any of those, I think there's still value in the market, but there's no way in the world I'd be backing anybody at $2 in a rising star market before the turn of the halfway point of the season.
Yeah, I would happily lay that $2 all day long, Wally. So yeah, you would have to look outside of that. Just based off like the players that I've seen, and that have caught my eye this year. I know he was a pick one, so it's an obvious one, but Lawler, he's got it all. I mean, that pack mark he took early in the game, on the weekend, he's just got the package, hasn't he? The only thing against him is he's not being thrown into a really big role. And so he's not getting the big numbers like, say, a Langford. He's getting a really good role at Melbourne. But for me, it would be between Lawler and Langford, and you're getting not a bad price for those two, mate.
Yeah. Harro, the way I look at this, though, rising stars are a little bit different because of how they're voted, obviously. And if players have big impact, even on small disposal, I think that on smaller disposal numbers, I think that they're a genuine chance. But the other one was and I'll combine two questions here because Jay also asked us future bets like teams to win the premiership that might get shorter odds and have cash out options. So I'll roll this into Bobby's question. I've had a look at this, mate. I'm gonna throw one at you. Freo are $34. This is in line with the cash out. We know that Freo, when they hit their straps, they are a very good team. Plenty of people liked them before the start of the season. They're about to go into this. So they got Port, then they do have Gold Coast away, but then they get North, Essendon, and St Kilda, Sydney. The likelihood is that Freo are going to be looking a lot better in 6 weeks than they are now, and $34, in my opinion, will shorten. So that's my one there. The other one for me, and they're unpredictable but the Giants have Carlton, Richmond, and Port in the next 3. They're at $13. So if they win all 3 of those, you're going to get a better price. I'm not saying either of these teams to win the flag. I'm purely looking at a 3 and 6 week projection of who we might be able to cash out.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand the logic in that, Wally, and that they're not bad suggestions. For me, no, and I'm happy. Yeah. I'm happy. I actually looked at this the other way as well. And I looked at this last week and I thought, geez, Hawthorn, $6.50 to miss the 8. With the view that you're going to come back and back them the other way in 4 or 5 rounds' time. Now, they lost on the weekend. They've come into $5.50. But they've got a really hard run, okay? And so I thought that could be an opportunity where you might be able to back Hawthorn to miss it. You could even back them to miss the top 4. I think it was $1.80. And maybe then come back the other way after they get through this tough period if they do drop a couple. The other one I looked at was the Swans, mate. And if they can win 2 of their next 3, get to the bye, and then they're going to have a heap of players coming back, and we know the quality in that side with all their players back, they could be another one that could make a late run for it as well.
Well, there you go. So there's a couple of options for us in terms of future markets that we think may firm up from 2 very, very different angles there. All right, next one. We've been asked, beyond trends in where the opposition concedes disposals, what part of a player's form matters? For example, do you place more weight on recent game average, venue performance, past matchups against the same opponent? That's from Gideon. So, Harro, I'll defer to you on that. But, I mean, we cover this in different ways a lot during each week. There's obviously a number of factors we look at.
Yeah. So when I'm looking at a player for his disposal line, I'll take a big sample to get a broader aspect, and then I'll really drill down and I'll go through the games where he missed, okay, and I'll work out, okay, what happened in each of those games. Are those things any chance of happening in this game? And quite often what you find is you drill down a little bit deeper and into those games where he's missed, and you can often find reasons that probably aren't going to repeat, or you're finding out that this guy he's a little bit inconsistent. He does happen to throw a shocker in every now and then. So I start with a big sample and I narrow that sample down until I'm happy with a quota of games, and I look at the head-to-head. It's interesting. There was a good example of it last week where certain coaches and certain teams do year after year put attention into the same sort of player. So it's 2 years in a row now that the Swans have put attention into Walsh, okay? And you pick up on that by looking at the head-to-head history between that player and that team. And there's a good one coming up this weekend with Zach Merritt, which we'll talk to in a little bit, where the head-to-head is a pretty good indicator. Okay, so yeah, I look at all those sorts of things. Recent form is really important. If a guy has missed in his last 5 games, I'm probably I'm going to treat him with a little bit of caution, unless I know the reason why. If it's just
Yep.
because you get guys obviously carrying injuries and you really can't work out that sort of stuff. But if a guy's missed and I know that he's had really hard attention that day from the opposition or whatnot, and they're not likely to get that again, then I can move forward with a bit of confidence. So that's kind of how I approach it. And we have talked plenty about this, but that does give a little bit more of an in-depth sort of view on it, Wally.
Nice one. Next one is your top 5 players in the comp to bet on. It's a hard task to cover that. We can talk about some consistencies, and we're talking about like a Rosie or something. And I think this changed over time, but can I just give you a few that I don't want to touch for a while? Warple at Hawthorn, we can't touch. We just can't touch him because we can't catch him. We always miss, and as much as I think I know about my footy club, we miss. Clayton Oliver, I have no idea what's going on there. Can't have him. And any North Melbourne player, because I don't know what Karko's going to do with him. Wargore was a proper utility on the weekend, and then we were just all over the place with Sheasel and all that. So they're the ones that I'm steering clear from. Any call-outs either side for you, Harro?
Well, definitely the guys who are likely to get tagged week after week. But yeah, as you said, more talking about our favourite players to bet on.
Yeah.
Just in recent times, I've had a lot of success betting on Rosie, as we've talked about. And a lot of that's down to a role change, which is taking the market a little bit to catch up on. And also what happened with Rosie, he got 27 2 weeks in a row whilst being tagged. So that gave me great confidence as well. So the market's saying, oh, he's getting 27, but I'm going, he's getting 27 and being tagged. What's he going to do without that? So Rosie's been one, probably a guy that a lot of people don't put a lot of recognition towards is Justin McInerney out at the Swans. He's a super consistent performer, goes under the radar, doesn't get a lot of attention from the opposition. So he's been a good one to back as well. Outside of that, mate, I'd have to put a bit more thought into it, but there's a couple for you to take away anyway.
Yep. Yeah, very, very good. Just a quick one. Do we class Mullen as a genuine good tagger now after another job he did there on Butters?
It's interesting because he didn't tag. He tagged Dacos and he had a week off from tagging, I believe, and then he's tagged Butters. So I think it's pretty obvious the type of player that they're going to use him with. Like he's not going to he's going to tag those guys who are really good runners, I'd say, and more, I think Butters definitely gets the ball inside and out, where Dacos, he gets a lot more handball receives. So I think that Geelong will use him when they've got the right type of player to go after, rather than, like, I couldn't see them sending him to a Bont, for instance.
I don't think he'd be.
Bont would just mark all over the top of him and exploit him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But where they find a guy, a smaller sort of running type who does a bit of damage, I think, he's doing a good job.
Ed Richards?
Possible, yeah. Yeah, that's a possibility for sure.
Okay. There you go. All right, mate. Very good. That's our questions. We got 9 big games we've got to get stuck into. So let's start at Thursday night at the Cattery. The Cats are $1.86. The Dogs are $1.98. Interestingly here, Dogs have actually won their last 2 down in Geelong. So we've seen a little bit of a pattern where it's not quite the fortress it was. They're still very good down there. The line's 1.5, but you can probably get about, I think you were saying we saw 4.5 out there. I thought you saw, where was that at, Harro? The 4.5 was?
Yeah, I saw, just using the Bet Sniper app, saw 4.5 at Dabble.
Great 4.5.
So, yeah, if you're not using Bet Sniper, it's good. It's like an odds comparison page, their opening page. You can see all the odds of all the different bookies. So if you like to shop around, that's a good tool to use, mate.
Yep. And the total over under is 178.5, Harrow. So you like the Doggies here?
Yeah, mate. Well, just ratings-wise, including the home ground advantage, I've actually got the Dogs as the highest rated side in my ratings at the moment in the AFL. So, but even if, we factor in the home ground advantage, I've got the Dogs by a goal in this, and obviously you can get a 4.5 start. So I'm pretty keen to go with the Dogs just based off that. You mentioned their record at the Cattery, so they've won their last two down there, and won them easily as well. I think they won by 40 odd points and 25 points their last two times.
Yep, that's
so.
right.
It's obviously not far from Whitten Oval down to Geelong, so it's not like maybe some of these interstate teams coming down there. But another factor, mate, we've got both sides off 5-day breaks here. The Cats did have some travel involved, and they also played a whole game of rotation down, where the Doggies had more of a bruise-free sort of game. Actually, that game between the Doggies and the Dons, only 90 tackles were laid for the whole match. Put that into perspective.
Pressure rating would have been under 100, Harro.
Yeah, well, Richmond and North, each side laid 90 tackles. So,
Richmond hit a pressure rating of 270 at one point, which is insanity. That was the opposite. There was Witches hats they were playing against on Saturday night, let's be honest. Yeah.
So I sort of think both sides come in, with relatively, even though both 5-day breaks, I feel like they come in both with a good chance. Just wanted to give a shout out to Ed Richards, actually. Number one score involvement player in the AFL right now. And maybe that is a sign that if they are going to use Mullen, he might be the guy that gets it. Because obviously when he gets it, he's doing a lot of damage. And a couple of his bullet-like passes on the weekend into their forward line were they were amazing. So he's a guy I've really been impressed with. And I do think back and I remember as a Blues fan, mate, Carlton had I think pick 11. They were tossing up, is it going to be Lockie O'Brien or Ed Richards? And unfortunately, mate, they got that one wrong because Ed Richards is a gun. And I've got no idea where Lockie O'Brien is these days. So, mate, while we're on the Blues too, mate, Matt Kennedy is another guy who's killing it at the Doggies.
The Dogs.
He's having
the wrong club for you.
Oh, mate. He's having an absolutely career best season. And it kind of makes sense. He's 27. Like, you're just letting a guy go in his absolute prime. So make that one make sense to me, Wally. But anyway, back to this one. There's a good area, and we just saw Dale have 49 possessions on the weekend. Now, the Cats, they concede the second most in the AFL to defensive ball users. So this could be a really good spot. We've seen like Rosie just had 32, Burton 26, Whitfield 30, Amon 29, Dacos 32, Zorko 28, Miller at 29, and he's $2 to have 29 at the tab. He's done that 4 in his last 5. So I feel like there's a bit of an angle there, mate, as well as, very keen to be on the Dogs. The Dogs, the highest disposal team in the comp, coming up against Geelong, who concede the 5th most disposals in the comp. So we'll find some disposable bets. We'll probably put an SGM out on Thursday for the punters. But otherwise, mate, just so hard to go against the Doggies here. Nothing against the Catters, but I'm very keen on the Dogs just based on what they've been doing, mate.
Yeah, they're the hottest team, or one of the 2 hottest teams probably with the Pies and footy at the moment. And as I always say, Harro, for our SGMs or any betting information closer to the jump, Footy FG Pod on Twitter or X, whichever side of the river you're from, whatever you want to call it. That's where we put that information each week. So some things have changed with how we're producing at the moment, but that has not. All right, we move on now to Friday's game. Dreamtime at the G on a Friday night. I love this. This is going to be really, really cool. I just hope the game lives up. And I have a lot of hope here. Essendon are $1.35, which from what I've seen last week and then what I'm seeing from the Tigs continuously feels small. Richmond's 321, so you're getting an 18.5 point line. The total over under is 165.5. One really interesting thing in this, Harro, and I was saying there was a lot of trends, either ground base or like we saw in the last game, or just head-to-heads here. The Bombers have snuck home in the last 2 of these games by a couple of kicks and a point. Richmond won the 13 before that. 13 meetings before that. So obviously the Tigs were very good. Essendon were nowhere near it in comparison. Am I crazy to think that the Tigs could maybe cause a little bit of a problem here at $3 plus?
Mate, if this game was being played with both sides off a 7-day break, in daytime conditions where Bolter is allowed to play, and Lynch was and Lynch was playing as well, I would have this almost even money. But this is just such a tricky setup for the Tigers. They're off a 5-day break, off a hugely taxing game. I mentioned it before, 90 tackles to each side, and that's like unheard of. They also lose Lynch and Bolter, who, two just huge players for them. Also throw in, there's going to be a bit of a bounce back factor for the Dons after getting their pants pulled down and humiliated. So I feel like they'll be pretty angry coming into this, and maybe a little bit extra motivation. So just on ratings, I kind of had the Dons about 10 points ahead. That's before I adjust for any of these factors, and I think that these factors are really important in this game. And I feel like also, if you can't bring that high energy to defend that ball movement by the Dons, then they're probably going to have their way with you. And so that's where I'm headed in this one, mate. And the Tigers concede the most disposals in the AFL, and the Dons get the second most. So I feel like there's going to be some really strong angles from a disposals point of view. Like, we've got to talk about Zach Merritt. He's coming off 19 and 20. The 19 he was tagged last week against the Dogs. He just got beaten up. Right, and that's not going to happen against this Richmond midfield. So he's obviously, his line's 28.5. He's done that the last 7 times against Richmond. Okay, he even did it in 2020 in the COVID year. So
on the reduced quarters.
Well, yeah, it was 2020. Maybe he did it before the reduced quarters came in. I'm not sure, but either way, he's done it the last 7 times, and to get his line at 28.5, I think that's a pretty good angle, given I think the Dons are going to have plenty of the footy. I feel like the Tigers, with a young side off this 5-day break and a hugely taxing game, I feel like that they're a little bit vulnerable here, mate, and that's the only reason I recommend that the Dons, I think, will get it done here. There's one other guy. We saw him in the Rising Star market, and that's Roberts for the Dons, and he's going to get a really good matchup as well. And, I talked about the Tigers. They give up a lot of disposals to these guys in the back line, and he's $2.35 to have his 25 possessions at Ladbrokes. He's done that in each of the last 4 matches, and he now gets a really good matchup. So, we're looking at Merritt, we're looking at Roberts, we're looking at the Dons. And I actually wish this game was being played under a more fair setup, with Richmond able to play their full side, because I think that they could potentially beat Essendon here. But given all the factors, mate, I'm quite keen on the Dons.
Mate, and Archie Roberts, if you think you can have an even bigger day, you can get $5 for the 30. And if you think Merritt can have a monster game, around $5 for that 35, and you can $14 for 40. So like, there's plenty of options out there. I think this will be a game that you'll definitely see a footy form guide SGM hitting our socials punters. So keep an eye out for that. All right, we move on to Saturday. Your Baggers taking on the Giants. Both relatively unimpressive last week. I mean, I think Carlton's job was definitely a tougher one than the Giants. Carlton come into this as $1.77 favourites and a 4.5 point line favourite. The Giants are $2.10. Interestingly, I spoke about trends earlier, Harro. This has been their 8 games they've played have alternated winners. So on, off, and Giants won the last one. So Baggers, maybe. I'm trying to find an angle for you here. The Baggers could be their go. 169.5 is the total line. It's under the roof, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, 12:30 start at Marvel. So
they're
early
two
one.
games on Saturday at Marvel. That's why they've had to start at 12:30.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's a 12:30 and then a night game.
Ah, right.
Amazing.
Didn't realise that.
There you
Amazing what they can do these days, Wally.
No, yeah, technology, Arrow. Yeah, all right, mate.
Well, yeah,
Let's get into
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my point of view, like, do we just want to continue back in the unders in Blues games? I mean, it's 9-1 this season, and we go back further than that. I think they're 15-1, given their last 6 of last season all went under as well. So, and you're getting 170 points, and That's around what the AFL average is, and Carlton are just continually producing games that go under that. And the other way we've been playing this is even when Carlton have been losing, as we saw last week, they're still not letting their opposition above, around that 85 sort of point level. And so you could play it either way, mate. Look, we're going to see some role changes for GWS's midfield this week. They're missing like Callahan, Kelly. Obviously, if Cornelio is fit, he'd be in there as well. So there's going to be some others get a chance in there. And we spoke last week, mate, about these role changes and how they bring some opportunity for some longer shot winners. We saw that happen again, actually, on the weekend. So we saw Berry go out of the Brisbane side, and they flipped another fella, I can't remember his name now, I'm having a blank, but out to the wing, and he had 28 and paid about $8. So we are going to look for these role changes. I don't know who it is. Like, could Toby Green go and play a full game in the midfield? These are the types of things I'm going to think about. But it also leaves Tom Green as a bit of a one-man show in that midfield as well. What we've seen, we saw it a little bit with Newcomb. When he's left one out without other guys around to help him, the coaches often will put pressure into that one guy. And we've seen Newcomb get tagged a fair bit lately. So I think that maybe Hewitt will play a really tight role on Green. And then Carlton will try and go head-to-head with the other matchups in the midfield. I feel like Bedford's likely to go to Walsh, and I feel like that's going to leave Cripper, probably in a really good spot here, mate. And, he actually copped a bit of trash talk in the media as well this week. It's quick. Like, they turned pretty quickly. He's coming off one of the greatest seasons ever, and they're getting
45 Brownlow votes.
Yeah. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Cripper really turn it on this week. He's $3.50 to have 30. He had 39 against the Giants last season. So there's a few angles there, but, mate, I actually have the Blues winning this on ratings with a home ground advantage. I think a big edge in the midfield. GWS missing some really important components. I'm happy to have a bet on the Blues to win here, mate. I'm not obviously – I don't have heaps of trust in them. You couldn't. No. But I've got them ahead here by a couple of goals, and I think we can get $1.80 for them to win. So happy to play there too, mate.
Nice one. All right, the Hawks take on the Lions at the G. Twilight Saturday. Hawthorn's $1.56. The Lions are $2.43. Now, this is an interesting one because, mate, let's be honest, neither team have looked great for the last month or so. Hawthorn haven't looked great since gather round. We know that, and even though they've banked some wins in there, Brisbane have been similar. They had a draw, then they've lost to Melbourne at home. Like, it's just neither team look good. Interestingly, here I had a look at this because I know that we've had the wood over them. Hawthorn's won 5 straight by an average margin of around 4 goals. In those games, Hawthorn on the ladder in those 5 years were 15th, 16th, 13th, 17th, and then it was the opening round of 2020 where they were also no good. Brisbane in all of those times were prelim finalists or grand finalists or winning flags. Like they were up there. So then 2 weeks ago, Hawthorn's had a pretty good last quarter to get over Melbourne by 5 goals. Brisbane's then lost to them. And so I'm looking at recency bias of how they're going versus a similar opposition. I'm just looking at this game. I mean, Hawthorn, the line 9.5 for me is really, really tempting. I'm trying to take my own bias out of it. But if I look at the last fortnight, I look at the history between the two teams, I look at how they're going versus where they've been going through that history, surely the Hawks win this.
Well, we are the footy form guide, so we do like to follow the form. And really, as you say, Wally, all the form does line up to make Hawthorn a bet here. Fakes sort of said in his presser that, they're off their tucker a bit, and it's down to they're lacking hunger. And it's not often you hear a coach they don't often criticise effort. Because it's almost a personal thing with his players then, but he straight out said we didn't have the hunger. So interesting to see if they can regain that hunger. They also, probably are missing Danaher quite a lot from where they were last year. Now the Lions have gone to the bottom of the line ladder which we like to talk about most weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is an indicator that they're being overrated by the market, and this is pretty common with premiers. When a team wins a premiership, it sticks in your mind so vividly, and it's hard to understand, that perhaps that's not the level that they're at right now, and they're certainly not performing at that level. And so you just have to look at how they actually are performing, and they are giving up a big home ground advantage to Hawthorn. I would like to see Newcomb be named. I know that he's under a bit of an injury cloud. I mean, if Hawthorn go in without him as well, that midfield battle could just be too overwhelming for them. So I wouldn't jump in before teams come out. But if Hawthorn are able to name, a pretty strong team with Newcomb in it, I'd be happy to be on the Hawks there, mate. We did see the Gold Coast midfield completely get a hold of that Hawthorn midfield, and Hawthorn was still really competitive. And I actually thought that Hawthorn game, I know how you were very flat, Wally, after that game. In our chat, you weren't too lively when they got done. But I sort of said to you then that I think that's the most impressive loss I've seen all year. They really stuck at it, the Hawks, and so I don't take anything away from them, losing to the Gold Coast up there, but, running it really close and having a really good crack. So I think that they're going okay, Hawthorn. Their midfield could get slaughtered again, but it doesn't mean that they're going to lose. But we will look at Brisbane midfielders' possessions. That's going to probably be something we're going to probably find a few bets there. And then also there's a few Hawthorn guys I've found too, and one of them's Ward. And obviously he's getting a much bigger role now. He's $1.97 to have 20. He's getting heaps of midfield time. He's hit 20 3 out of his last 4 games, the miss being 19, which if you're playing that at the tab, it's 4 out of 4. So I don't mind that. And also Chol. Chol's $1.90 to kick 2. His last 5 games, he's gone 3-3, 2-2-3. So he's hitting that mark very consistently, and you can get $1.90 for him to do that. Otherwise, mate, wait for teams to come out and then consider a bet on Hawthorn for me.
Yeah, well, luckily they'll get Nash back, which will help. He's obviously been out with suspension, so he'll come back in, which is going to be needed. That really bolsters up. Not that he's the best user of the footy, but just what he can do in there in terms of his just size and running with another player. But it's a good shout on Newcomb. But if Newcomb winds up, Joshy Battle's a bit proppy too. So Newcomb was in a moon boot, but they reckon he's okay. Josh Battle obviously wasn't 100% towards the end of it. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there in the lead up. But neither team going well, but both teams still in the top 4 with 7 and 7.5 wins each. So going okay without going really, really well. All right, mate. We of course now move on to the Saturday night. And as I said, Saturday night there's 2 games at Marvel. North Melbourne v Collingwood is the other one. So this is North Melbourne, $5.30. Collingwood, $1.16. The line, I'm looking for the line here, Harro. I've
had 35, I think, roughly.
34.5. And the total over under is 175.5.
Yeah.
So, well, mate, I don't know how Collingwood could be going any better at the moment. I don't know how North Melbourne could be going any worse. That's the way I look at this game.
Actually, I think the last 4 weeks I've seen a big improvement in North Melbourne.
Do you reckon, mate? That game, is that giving props to Richmond then? Because they should be showing up. Their development should be so much more progressed than Richmond's is. So they should be showing up and winning that game comfortably, not having it come down to a mark inside defensive 50 with 20 seconds to go. Do you know what I mean?
I understand. Yeah, I know what you mean. But I think, if you go back previous to 4 weeks, they were giving up 130 points every game. Yeah. And so they obviously ran Port really close. They've drew with Brisbane. They obviously beat Richmond. And there's one other game in there, I think, where they held their own. So I've seen it in North, and we talk about the line ladder again. Well, North are high up on that line ladder. So they are being a little bit underrated by the market. So one thing. Do you remember this game between these two last year, Wally?
48 points up at halftime, lost by a solitary point, didn't they?
Yeah. So, and with 37 goals kicked in that game, it was a strange game, but a really fun one to watch. And I remember back to that game, and I think Larky had a fill up that day. He's actually been a little bit quiet lately, but his last 3 games against the Pies, he's kicked 4, 5, and 5. So, I think maybe he enjoys playing the Pies, and we might find a big price there. As you said earlier in the show, Wally, we do need to be a little bit careful with trying to pick out some North disposal bets. I would normally be saying midfielders against the Pies and that defensive ball user as well. Really good areas from a defence-first position point of view, but Clarko really threw the magnets around on the weekend, and it was difficult to get a read on it. It is important to listen to the pre-match press conferences, because if you were, and I missed this one, but I had to listen back to it after the game to see what I missed. And he said straight out that Sheasel will be moved forward. And if I had known that, we could have avoided him. And obviously he only had 20 possessions when his going rate's about 30. So that had a big impact. And he's also moved like guys like McKirch. I think he had 8 guys go through the centre square in the opening quarter. So they were really running a lot of rotation through there, which was interesting. But it's going to make it hard to bet on their guys because you just don't know. He did say in his post-match presser that he is looking forward to seeing UDL play a little bit more forward. So I know he got 25, but you love that,
don't you? This UDL.
He's a good ride boy too. He's from down this way, but anyway.
I know, mate. There's like a sign of him at the Right Footy Club.
Is it really?
100%. They've got an LDU sign at the Right Footy Club. There you go, UDL. All right, yeah. All right, so
sorry.
Now because he was the one I thought you could bank on.
Yeah.
Continually going through the midfield. And now they're saying, because he's had 27, 32, 28, 25, 25 in the last month and a bit. But now he's saying he might even play him up forward a bit.
Yeah, I think they're going to really rotate these guys. So if we do get a line like a 27.5 or something for him, we might look to play the under there. But it is going to be a little bit difficult until we figure out what Clarko's up to.
Harro,
they get Curtis back.
We're going to get that line too. We're going to get it. He's $1.42 for 25. We're going to get a 27.5 point line, I would suggest. Yeah,
okay. I think that could be a good area. North, they've had a big focus on defence the last 4 weeks, and we've seen it. They've kept their sides a lot lower than they were beforehand. So if you feel inclined, you can get under 105.5 for the Pies. If you think you can trust North to continue this form that they've put together over the last month. But that's about as far. I don't think the 35.5, I feel like that's a tough one. The Pies, they're moving away from the MCG. North kind of like Marvel. They get Curtis back. I'm not willing to play the 35.5, but I know that they're putting a big focus on defence at North right now. So the under 105 something I'm happy to have a play at.
Now, Harro, in terms of goals, just going back to Larky, he's $3.40 for 3. He's $8 for 4, and if he can repeat the 5 effort, he's $19. So they're big prices for him, considering what he's capable of. I know he's been a little bit off. He's only kicked 7 goals in the last 5 matches. So he's
kicked
definitely
a few
been
points
off.
too. He had that game. Where he kicked him out of it with a bunch of points, and he's normally a great kick. So. Against Port. He should have kicked the bag against Port.
Yeah, that's right. He did too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't ideal. Mate, the other game on Saturday night is Fremantle versus Port Adelaide. Freo's $1.33, coming back home with a win under their belt on the road. Port Adelaide are just, $3.36. They are just... I don't know what you do here. I think that Ken needs to just maybe step aside and they can get started with their future. Because it's really, I don't know, mate. Look, let's be honest. Last time they went over there, they kept Freo out of the finals and booked a top 4 spot for themselves. So last time they were there, they were good. They've won 6 of their last 7 and including their last two at Optus. So their record against Freo actually stacks up really well. Their record over there is great. Their last game over there, they were really, really good, but they're just, you can't have any faith in them the way they're going.
They're just nowhere this season, are they? And it makes sense. I mean, we didn't like it from the very start, this whole setup that they had with Ken. And I think it never works. When sides really care, they dig deep late, and they've just been getting run over late. They do give up when they're not, when they don't have a sniff. So, my first thought with this one, mate, we like having our nicknames for players, and Big Dick Tracy for Freo. He's one of my favourite players, actually. He's a proper man. He's a man mountain. And he's that old school sort of full forward. I love the way he goes about it. Anyway, he's $2.20 at Lads to kick 3.
That's massive overs. He's about $1.70, $1.80 everywhere else.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go.
Wow.
So
that is massive overs.
So that price might not last long, but they do concede the second and most goals to key forwards in the AFL. We just saw Cameron kick 7. Also, I expect Freo to turn up on Saturday night. If you take out the 3 games this season where Freo have failed to turn up, which was rounds 1, 6 and 8, the games that they've been competitive in is kick 4, 3, 3, 6, 2 goals, 3 and 2. So I expect Freo to win. I expect them to obviously Port with a few injuries now, travelling. I feel like they could give up again. I've actually got Freo well ahead on my ratings anyway. So that's one area I'd like to play. We saw the Cats tag Butters, and it really worked well. We saw Freo tag Dacos with Wagner a fortnight ago. They're kind of similar players, Butters and Dacos, or a little bit different, but similar like shape and size and running ability, all that sort of stuff. So I think that might be an area, especially with Horn Francis out, Freo playing Rosie down back. I feel like that Butters has got to get some attention in this. So keep your eye on that one. The other guy is Bolton. Since Young has gone out of the side, Bolton's had 28 and 24. He's taken over Young's role. And we're getting $2.20 for Bolton to have 20. So I feel like there's a bit of an opportunity there. I know one of our followers on the weekend backed Bolton at $7.50 to have 25. He flagged that on our page. Now, he had 24. So I hope if anyone followed him in, he went at the tab, because that would still be a winner.
Get that extra one, don't you? Kick 3 too, didn't he? Kick 3?
Yeah, mate, he's in some form. He's really lighting it up at the moment.
Well, we know, Harro, his ceiling is, 2 years ago, before the season, before he went over there, people were saying this guy's top 10 in the comp.
Yeah.
So this is a player that has a massive, massive ceiling. So it's good to see.
Yeah, no, he's killing it. So, obviously well done to the Freo recruiters. So everybody would love to have Bolton on their side. He's a gun. Oh. One other area I want to play here, mate. Port, they concede number 2 in the AFL disposals to rucks. And now we're seeing Luke Jackson getting the solo ruck. Okay, so the last 4 games that Port have played, they conceded 17 to Riley O'Brien. That's 6 above his average. They conceded 27 to English, 9 above English's average. 23 to Sherry, that's 5 above his average. 26 to Grundy, that's 10 above his average. Look, when Jackson is solo ruck, he's getting around about 20, all right? And he's $2.05 to have 20 at Ladbrokes. All right, wow. So I think we've got something there as well.
Yep, mate, I like it. This is a good betting game. Yeah. Now we look at a lot of angles there, so that'll be a fun one for a Saturday night. A little bit of a later start too. We get that quarter grace. It starts after 8 because obviously over in the West, so you can get that. It's funny, isn't it? Just half an hour different start time. If you've got to run the 2 games at once, makes a huge difference. It means you can just keep an eye on both and you can watch the end to both games without them clashing. All right, that's our Saturday slate. Let's move ahead to the Sunday. Sunday kicks off with an interesting one. Adelaide against West Coast. The Crows are $1.05. The Eagles are $10.50. I don't think anyone's expecting the Eagles to go over there they got up for this round on the weekend. They did a great job. They beat St Kilda, fantastic. I think that they'll be coming back to earth here. The line's 50.5. The interesting thing is that the total is 165.5. Here's the Crows' last 4 games against West Coast. They've scored 137, 123, 174, and 102. I didn't go back any deeper than that because then Adelaide drops off and West Coast was obviously better. They've dropped the last few years. So although they're the individual ones, I can't help but think that 165.5 could be in danger, Harro.
Just wanted to check the weather.
That's what I'm doing right now. I'm going straight to the bomb, and I'm telling you right now, we're in Adelaide.
Yeah.
7-day forecast. Don't need the radar.
No,
and mate, you get started. I will tell you exactly where we're at.
Yeah.
And mate,
go ahead.
1 to 15 mil. 80% chance.
Yeah.
There you go.
That explains it, Wally.
But hang on, we know like these guys are wrong more than us. The bomb.
Yeah.
Like we have a better hit rate than they do, right? So let's just keep an eye on that. It's not necessarily going to rain on Sunday. They don't know it is. They're just having a crack, having a guess.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. How many times they get it wrong, Harro?
Oh,
so
mate,
what we'll do is we'll check back in on that. There might be weather around, but I'm telling you, if there isn't, then, or if it's not torrential, 165.5 is in massive danger.
Mate, also, 40-kilometre-hour winds, and it's a nor'wester, so that'll be blowing straight down the ground. So that'll be to the right of screen. That is, and also that means that the open end will have the wind. That'll be very hard to score at that open end. Because it's not the sheltered end, it's blown towards the sheltered end. So anyway, that'll be a big factor as well. So, but look, we'll see on the day. I mean, these forecasts are, not that reliable. So it's something we might approach this, based off the weather being fair. And then on the day, we'll see if we need to adjust. Yeah. So look, I thought West Coast been a bit better in recent times. Obviously, they got the win over St Kilda and, I was actually keen on West Coast too. So, listening back to last week's pod, I thought they'd actually get the job done against the Saints at a big price, and they did. So that was a good result. The Crows have kind of shown that they know how to hand out a belting at the same time. And West Coast, having had their win, now they jump on the road. And I think that, this is just going to be all one-way traffic in the Crows' favour. And look, it's the key forwards as well. No McGovern down there. West Coast concede also the most to inside mids. And they haven't been using Hutchinson as a tagger recently, where they did a few weeks ago. And I look at Rankin here, mate, and he's $2.85 to get his 25. He's already done that 5 times this year. And remember, he was subbed out at 3/4 time one game when he was on track. And he did it last week. And you're getting $2.85 against the best matchup in the comp for that position. So I quite like that as well. The Crows' key forwards, it's a little bit of a lottery of who you choose, but they should find it to their liking and, have a fill up as well. And also that 50-point line, I don't think it's enough. I think the Crows they'll have that covered by 3/4 time, Wally.
Wow.
Now, also,
you know what I like to do? Yeah, go, Harry. You go.
You also get the sort of situation in play if you're savvy enough and you've got an account that'll take a live bet. Is at quarter time. Let's just say the Crows. Let's just say the Crows. Let's say they kick into it in the first quarter. Well, you can jump on them at quarter time, knowing that they've got 2 quarters with the wind and only 1 against the wind. That's a little strategy that, if this wind's going to be a big factor, you might want to wait for the toss because the last thing you want to see is the Crows kicking into a 5-goal breeze in the first quarter and it gets to quarter time, they're 3 goals down. They need to win the next 3 quarters by 70 points. So, it's something that you might want to wait until maybe the game started before you have your bet.
Harro, do you remember I think it was GWS Western Bulldogs last year where the wind was just horrendous at Ballarat. And we were ready to go. We loaded up. We were good to go. We were watching the toss, and we were going line across the 4 quarters against the wind. And then they were too smart for us, the books. They shut it as the coin was going in the air. They shut the markets, and they were just a little bit more clever than we were. But
I had a good one day down when North were playing in Hobart, and there was a raging breeze going down the ground, and North were obviously shit house at the time, and they had all these race 2 markets, race to 15, race to 25, race to 30. North were paying a huge price on all these race 2 markets, and look, literally 10 minutes in, they'd already kicked 5 goals, and they were playing one of the top sides. And it might have been Collingwood. I can't remember who they were playing, but they were playing a top side. That's why you were getting such a big price, and they that was a beauty, but I can't. They don't let you get away with that sort of stuff anymore.
No, they do not, Harro. They do not. All right, we move on. Melbourne take on Sydney at the G on Sunday. The D's are $2. The Swans are $1.85. The line's 1.5. The total over under is 171.5, mate. We keep talking about the Swannies and when they get players back, but that's probably not the case this week, getting a lot back. But the Ds were good. The Ds were good. They were pretty good against the Hawks.
Yeah.
And then they went up there to Brisbane and they were really good.
And that'll do a lot for them too, I think. And so, look, I'm happy to back the Ds here, purely based on player availability. The D's really aren't missing much. I think they get Finey back this week. And now Malcolm's back. He's playing well. He'll probably do a job on the Lizard. We saw him play on Harris Andrews, and he negates a good backman, and he also kicks goals himself. So he's good for them to have back in their side. They're really not missing much, the D's, where you look at the Swans. I think they'll get Mills potentially back this week. But now they lose McInerney out the other side. McInerney, for me, has been a gun, really underrated. So on their home ground, I'm just happy to be with the Ds here. And the other area, we like to look at this every week, and it's who's Jordan going to play on? Because whoever he plays on, every week he keeps them low. I kind of think it could be like a Salem this week. That's where I'm angling with this, but if anyone else, has some information there, we'd love to know. I mean, obviously Petraka is an absolute weapon, and just gets it done every week. He could go to track. I feel like, it's a little bit of a risky one for the Swans to send him to track because track could just beat him. But that could be a play. That could be an option for him too. But, maybe it's a Salem. But anyway, keen to be with the Ds. They've shown a lot in the last month. Goody keeps saying that they're progressing, they're getting towards something, and I can see it now. And so, given that they've got close to full strength compared to the Swannies still missing a heap of players, and like the Swans last week, I haven't seen a team. It's almost like they're chasing 200 in a game of cricket. They get there with one bloke making 140.
Yeah,
it's that's the way it looked, and Heaney just absolutely put his team on his shoulders last week, and amazing performance. But it's not a way you want to be winning. You don't want to be winning based off one or two guys just having absolute blinders. So just overall, I feel the D's are going a bit better, and at home, I think they'll get the Chockies, mate.
Yeah, very good, Harro. All right, last game of the round, St Kilda take on Gold Coast. Coming off. One's just coming off an average 2 weeks. The other one's coming off a really high. Gold Coast have made it their own up there in Darwin, Harrow. It's great there. I really hope the Hawks don't have to go there next year. Humidity, the conditions, like going up there, it's not a great road trip for a visiting team. It's awesome for the Suns, and they've done it really well. They're $1.50 travelling to Marvel. The Saints are $2.59. This just feels like there's nothing behind this. This is the exact sort of game that St Kilda will win. only based on what we have seen year after year with St Kilda and their trends, and that's it. There's no logic behind it because there's no logic a lot of the time in the results of their games. The line's 12.5. The over-under is 171.5, Harro. Obviously, we're not here just to bet with finger in the air like going, oh, well, that's what the Saints do. But how much does it take out of Gold Coast? They've gone up. They've played 2 tough games of footy or 2 close games of footy. Our one was more tough than the Doggies. I don't think that was overly tough. Then they come back down here to a ground which they don't like because they don't have a great record there. They lost to Richmond there early in the year. We know their coach hates it. Mate, like, how do we break this game down?
Well, a little bit like the Richmond game, I wish that there weren't these other factors at play, because you look at the Suns and how they've gone after they've come back from Darwin. And look, last year they lost to the Blues by 5 goals. And then that was at Marvel as well. The year before that, they lost to the Blues by 10 goals. So that's their two efforts. Now, they've improved a lot, okay? They have improved a lot. And if you go back to 2022, actually, they had the bye after their Darwin game. So I factored that one out. Yeah, and they did. They stunk when they came to Marvel last time. But look, now look at the Saints. Apparently Miller is going to be out. Also, McRae's out. And he's the number 1 contested possession winner in the comp. So, and Miller, I mean, he's just a gun. So if those two are out, given that I feel like the Suns are such a stronger side, I'm going to probably overlook this trend. And I'll probably take that trend on just based on the Suns should be maturing. They're a lot better than what they were in the past. They do have, a 9-day break into this game. So that's got to help as well. It's not like they're off a short break. They've got a 9-day break. And Dimmer just sort of has them humming at the moment. And I don't reckon Dimmer gets the recognition in the media or around the traps that some other coaches get. You'd never really hear them gloating about Dimmer, but mate, he's doing a great job. And I think that he's got that team playing really strong footy and a really good brand. And I think that the Gold Coast will beat the line. Was it 9.5? Is that what, that's what it was when I looked earlier.
12.5.
12.5 now. So the line's moved a couple of points, but look, 2 goals against, we've got a top 4 side playing what looks like a bottom sort of 5 or 6 side. You take those factors away from, Gold Coast returning from Darwin. If they can show a bit of maturity, they should be too strong and beat this line, mate.
Very good, mate. All right, that wraps us up for the 9 games. But, of course, we need to go to the best bet of the round. And we're going all the way back to the start, Harro.
Yeah, we are, mate. And we obviously had the Doggies as our best last week. And I just feel like they're playing such good footy. We're going to have to continue on the doggy train and back them getting a 4.5-point start against the Catters at the Cattery. Now, if you can't get the 4.5 at double, I'm happy to take the plus 2.5, which you can get everywhere else. But, mate, best bet this week is the Doggies.
Very good, Harro, mate. As always, you've been brilliant. Enjoy the footy this weekend. Looking forward to catching up next week. Again, we're in our new digs here, so it's much nicer being able to see your face each week. Enjoy, punters, and all the best.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.